Are we doing devil trigger joke? Is this what we're doing? I shouldn't. This is Agent Trigger. Can she change the meta forever? Trigger is an upcoming S-rank electric stun agent. However, unlike Qingyi, Trigger's gameplay is effectively passive. What do I mean by that? I beat you! And then you can forget about it. She works by unleashing aftershock attacks while off field. You can see this in the story when you get to demo Trigger for both the Ambi story. Actually, it's only the Ambi story and the event. Yeah, it's only the Ambi story and event. So as you are attacking agents, Trigger is appearing on the field. She's giving you text on the screen that says, "Fire!" That's Trigger. By attacking off field, Trigger does daze over time with significantly less field time than other stun agents. While she may not be the strongest support in the game, I am really looking forward to having Trigger on my account, because here's the thing about supports. We need more than one support. The more supports you have, the more teams you can play, and things just get easier. So while, yes, it's true Trigger may not be impactful as Ms. Astriao, that doesn't exactly matter if she is the best alternative to Astriao. And that in and of itself is a utility. When you commit a support to one team, you still have options for the other teams. That is what I am most excited for about Trigger, more so than her buffing Ambi. But you found yourself disappointed by Soldier Zero Ambi. Like me, Trigger will help buff that agent and allow that character to perform better. The downside is that is technically still a team that wants Astriao, but it is the current strongest Ambi team. So if you're looking for if you're looking to know if you should pull Trigger for Soldier Zero, I strongly recommend it. Can you tell I've been watching a lot of Daredevil? Good show, by the way. So yes, Trigger can quote unquote save Soldier Zero Ambi. If you don't know, Trigger's aftershocks are considered basic attacks. They are released as your character does basic attacks, dodge counters, EX special attacks, chains, and ults. And while you do that, Trigger will continuously fire shots. Additionally, Trigger's EX special and ultimate attack allow her to enter a state where she has unlimited firepower for a set number of attacks or within a time limit. This differs with her EX special and her ultimate. It should be 4 from the EX special and 6 from the ultimate. Over a time period I do not know off the top of my head, it should be on screen. So after you use Trigger's EX special attack or ultimate, you need to attack a lot and try to really capitalize on this opportunity to get extra days out of Trigger, because you don't want to waste those shots. Now, I actually want to tackle a big misconception. People may say Trigger is a fully off-field character. You don't have to do anything with her between her minute-long duration. Well, that's not necessarily wrong. I want people to be aware that Trigger's defensive assist is fantastic, and Trigger's quick assist shortcuts to her B3 and her B4, which are also fantastic in terms of days. Switching to Trigger for defensive assists and quick assists with Astra are a great way to contribute more days and get potentially more performance out of Trigger. So yes, it's true she can be fully passive, but that doesn't mean she has to be. How does Trigger's gameplay work? At the start of combat, you're gonna sit down and launch some shots, build up resource, and then you're gonna play the game. You're gonna use Trigger's ultimate outside of stun because it has very high days and it can greatly help with the stun. And you're gonna play Trigger with electric or attack agents. Recommended skill priority, basic attack above all else, followed by EX, assist, and chain / ult, EX and assist, all roughly equal after the basic attack. So above all else, basic attack. Her aftershocks are basic attacks. Like, comment, subscribe. We're gonna try to do more Zenless content. More Genshin content is coming. Did you know most of you watching are not currently subscribed? You should subscribe. Drive discs. Now, this is another heavily debatable thing about Trigger. From what we currently understand about how Trigger hits days thresholds, her overall best set is currently thought to be Shockstar Disco. because Trigger's own damage contribution does not outweigh getting to stun faster. To put it in simple terms, you have to build Trigger for damage. That doesn't mean it's good. Because the aftershocks are considered basic attacks, this 20% daze is 20% more daze on all of her field attacks and all of her sniper attacks, which is a majority of her daze dealt. Although, if you did not know, daze is threshold based, so having 20% more daze may not equal more stuns in, let's say, a deadly assault. And in that case, you'd want to look at Shadow Harmony. Shadow Harmony is the best personal damage set option for Trigger. It gives aftershock damage bonus, it gives crit rate, it gives attack. While it is less daze than Shockstar, it is more personal damage, which may or may not be better. We expect it to not be better, but it's possible that you won't hit a daze threshold for an additional stun, which can make Shadow Harmony better. Additional, more niche set options. These are like the passive buff sets that you can just use in a team. If no one's holding them already, Trigger can absolutely use them. Astral Voice and Protopunk. You know the drill with these sets. They're good. Just solid damage boosts. You're actually going to hear a similar story when we talk about engines. This is Spectral Gaze. This is Trigger's engine. You're going to hear a lot of hype for this engine in other content creators' Trigger coverage. And I'm going to tell you, this engine's really good. While it isn't the highest daze option available, it is the highest personal damage option available, and it's the highest buffing option available. The keyword here is it buffs the most of any stun engine. The 25% Death Shred is estimated at roughly a 16% damage increase over Restrained. And that's for the entire team. I didn't even say the effect. Engine gives crit rate to Trigger, and it gives Death Shred for the entire team. 25% Death Shred to be specific. Yeah, it's very good. Here's another misconception I want to talk about. Yeah, Trigger's engine is very good. That does not mean it is mandatory. Trigger is perfectly good without her engine. Do not feel pressured into spending more than you otherwise would. Now, if you don't have Spectral Gaze, let's talk about the alternatives. If you have other limited engines, such as the Ice Jade Teapot or the Blazing Laurel, you actually can use either of those because Trigger's aftershocks are considered basic attacks. They will stack these engines. That also means you can use an engine like Restrained, and Restrained should be Trigger's best free-to-play available engine. If you don't have Restrained and don't want to spend 30 witches for it, which is perfectly reasonable, I don't know if I would. Restrained it's all right. We've got 3 A rank options for you. The Box Cutter, which is 10% daze on aftershock attacks. The Fossil Engine, which is actually the highest daze option when its passive is fully active. And the Steam Oven, which is the one that is active most of the time in Deadly Assault, unlike the Fossil Core, but they all have some give and take. Your mileage may vary. If you aren't going for super high Deadly Assault kills, I would recommend the Precious Fossil Core. If you're looking for something that will always be more consistent, I would recommend the Steam Oven or the Box Cutter, assuming you don't have Restrained. Hellfire Gears, it's all right. It is an impact main stat, so it's always going to be all right. Teams. This is Soldier Zero Anby. Trigger saves Soldier Zero Anby? Maybe. Yeah. Soldier Zero Anby is a very alright character. Trigger is going to specifically buff her. There is synergy with Soldier Zero and Trigger because Soldier Zero gives aftershock crit damage, while Trigger's primary method of damage is aftershocks. So when you play Anby with Trigger, Trigger does more damage, which can make Shadow Harmony potentially better than it currently is in other teams. The best support option here is technically Astra Yao, but if you don't want to use Astra, you are free to use Nicole, Caesar, or Lucy. The performance between the three, honestly, it's all pretty similar, and it's gonna be a bit down to preference. Technically, the best is supposed to be Caesar, but it could very easily be Nicole. Depending on uptime, it's probably Nicole, let's be real. No, Rena? God, no. God. Now, while you may think, oh, I need to have Ambi to play Trigger. No, that's not true at all. If you didn't know, that team is not limited to Soldier Zero Ambi. You can play any attack agent there. Would that be Evelyn, GN, Soldier 11, even Harumasa or Ellen? You can play Astra Trigger. Why does this work? I'm glad you asked. Trigger M0P1 buffs a roughly equivalent amount to Nicole M6P5. The difference between the two is that Trigger does significant days. Because of this, Trigger is breaking up Astra Nicole for most attack agents, potentially. So you can just lift the attack agent from Astra Nicole and put them into Astra Trigger, and you should be getting a slight upgrade. For most agents, there will be exceptions to that. And of course, that is assuming you have Trigger's engine. Similarly, non-Astra options, we gotta talk about double stun, lighter Trigger, and Ching-Yi Trigger. This is the Hugo team, so if you're excited for Hugo, you may want to consider Trigger just for this. Sort of, we'll see, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. These are the teams that we're looking at for Hugo, so I figured I would mention it here. All right, now we got the important and obvious stuff out of the way. Important and obvious stuff out of the way. It's time for me to unload my cope onto you. I really want Astralist teams that are equally good. I do not think Trigger will accomplish this, but she gets us closer than anyone else. I am putting my eggs in this basket. Trigger's additional ability is activated by any electric agent, meaning you can play her in anomaly teams with Yanagi. So you can play Yanagi Miyabi Trigger, Yanagi Bernice Trigger, Yanagi Vivian Trigger. Additionally, you could play Jane Seth Trigger. No, these are not the best in slot teams, but they should be better than any other support option. And that is why I am most interested in Trigger. I really would like to play Trigger with Yanagi Miyabi, primarily, because I want the option to put Astra somewhere else without feeling like I'm griefing myself. It's not that Astra is a perfect support. She has a lot of weaknesses. She doesn't give energy. She doesn't do any days. She doesn't give any decibels. She doesn't apply any anomaly either. She just gives a lot of stat, and it's more stat than any other current support. But I am looking for the replacements. Unfortunately, Trigger's Aftershocks do slightly consider to anomaly buildup, in just enough to be minorly annoying, where playing Trigger will technically reduce the damage of your shocks, but it's technically more buildup. It ends up netting out to be a negative thing. But I'm optimistic about this. I've spoken to some friends and they really think it's got potential, and I really want to believe. This is my copium from me to you. Now, at the end of the video, I want to just give a general opinion. Trigger's pretty chill. I think she's going to be really comfortable. I think not a lot of people will realize she has a good defensive assist and will underutilize that, but it's really good. Trigger as a whole seems like, well, basically she's Caesar 2, if you know what I mean. What do I mean when I say she's like Caesar 2? She doesn't buff as much as Astra, but she gives days and she does buff a lot. Additionally, she is an electric character and supports for specific matchups, UCC. Will Trigger make Ambi feel much better? Yes. Trigger will make Soldier Zero feel much better. The other thing that you're going to hear a lot is Trigger needs X, Trigger needs Y. Why would you pull Trigger without engine? Why would you pull Trigger without M1? Yeah, Trigger has a great M1 and a great P1. Trigger's Mindscape Cinema Level 1 and W Engine Spectral Gaze are great. 16% and 14% team DPS increase just on the buffs alone. This is pretty similar to other support and stun agent M1s. Exception is that her engine is specifically very good. What do I mean by that? Ching-Yi's M1 is 15% Def Shred. Caesar's M1 is 15% Red Shred. Astra's M1 is 18% Red Shred. These are technically similar to Trigger's own M1. So while, yeah, it's a very good thing, and you're certainly not going to complain about owning it because more damage is good, whether that's worth it or not is ultimately up to you, and it's far from mandatory. You should not feel pressured to pull more than you are comfortable with on Trigger. I was saying earlier that she's kind of like Caesar 2 And she is. That also applies to this Mindscape angle. Caesar has great Mindscapes. People don't exactly value them very highly because you would have to be playing Caesar to use them. So think about that. Wait and see how much we play Trigger before you decide to pull a Mindscape. But yeah, I think Trigger is a very solid agent and a very solid choice. And top it all off, she's got a really nice